ways we find where God is alive and being exhibiting that comic spirit is when we tell stories of our lives, and when we tell stories of people that we know, when we tell true stories of what's going on in the world. And one of those stories is going to be brought to us by Rick Hall and Laura, who are going to tell a story that is a true story about Rick's grandfather. And so I invite you to let the whole of spiritual life envelop you as you hear this story, experience this story, and may you discover God and God's ways, true ways, again.
So this is based on something that happened to my grandfather back in the 60s, back in the Midwest. He was a minister at a Baptist church, one of his first ministry positions in a Baptist church back in Illinois. And, okay, just any Midwesterners here? Holy cow. Any native Southern Californians here? I said to Laura one day, I said, I know so few native Southern Californians. And she said, what about our daughters? Okay, now I've told this story in clubs and in bars and other places, and I don't have to give this warning beforehand. I do when I do it in church. I have to warn you. Several times when I'm telling the story, I'll say we're in church, and I'll say, let's open our hymnals to number 224 and sing "Trust and Obey" verses 1, 2, and 4. Don't do that, okay? I don't have to say that in a bar, because I don't have to explain that. So let's take a little trip back to 1962, shall we? Although Venice, Illinois was a small town, they managed to have two Baptist churches. There was the Southern Baptist Church over on Pine Street. It was an all-white congregation. And there was the First Baptist Church. It was over there by the grain elevator. It was an all-black congregation. Now, when I accepted the ministerial position at the Southern Baptist Church, I didn't even realize there was another Baptist church in town. Till one day I was sitting in my office. I was working on a sermon for Sunday morning, and there was a knock on the door. A big black lady was standing there. Candy Lee was her name. She said that their minister over at First Baptist passed away about a month ago. And she asked on behalf of the congregation if I'd be willing to go over to their church and preach my sermon a second time on Sunday mornings till they found themselves a new minister. Now, I was not completely comfortable with that request. You see, I'd attended a black Baptist church in seminary one time, and I know they're Baptists, but they do things different than we did. I could hardly keep up. So I prayed about it. Then I talked it over with my wife, Clara, and the deacons over at Southern Baptist. Now, they were split on this issue. Clara, she felt like this was the path God had chosen for me, you know. Horace Crone, head of the deacons over at Southern Baptist, said, well, if you feel like this is God's will, we won't stand in your way. But don't you be surprised, Reverend. You get over there and you don't fit in. You see, they're different than we are. I have a feeling he was not talking about their doctrine. But he helped me make up my mind rather quickly. I called up Candy Lee the next morning. I said, yes, ma'am. I'd be proud to preach at your church on Sunday mornings. Now, the first time Clara and I went over there, we were both nervous. Oh, I knew down deep inside a white man would not be their first choice for a minister. And I wanted to trust that the Lord would see me through this, but I had my human fears now, didn't I? Well, it took about 5 minutes in that church for me to realize those fears were completely unfounded. Oh my goodness, they treated us like old friends that had been absent for a period of time. And we're just coming back for a visit. And if the color of my skin bothered them at all, well, they just let on to it. I told Clara, I said, I like giving my sermon twice on Sunday mornings. It gives me that second chance in case I don't get it quite right the first time. Oh, would that we had a second chance more often in life, yes, sir? I even felt so comfortable that after just a few weeks, I walked into the deacons meeting at Southern Baptist and I said, you know what? maybe we should try combining these two little Baptist churches, make one big one. Oh my goodness. Who would have thought I asked them to worship Jesus in their underpants? Oh, this is the way we've always done it, said Horace Crone. It was good enough for my folks, it's good enough for me. Horace Crone very often spoke for the whole congregation, whether they were consulted or not. I quickly learned that Horace Crone was a cross I had to bear. After that evening, I didn't suggest it to the Black Baptist Church. No, sir, didn't see the point in that. No, sir. Now, I say I preach the same sermon at both services, but I'm here to tell you it was a completely different worship experience. With the first service with a white congregation, I am to start at 8:30, and I better be done by 9:30, or somebody's going to come up and give me a talking to about it afterwards. I remember I was preaching one of my favorite sermons based on, yes, its chariot swings low, but how low must it swing to pick you up? Powerful message. I pull it out on occasion still today. Well, I just finished that service when I saw Horace Crone making a beeline up the aisle. I looked at the clock on the wall, 9:42. Oh, I was 12 minutes late. Well, here it comes, I thought. So I guess old Horace Crone read some article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that said the average human can only concentrate for 15 minutes. You talk longer than that, you're going to confuse people, he said. Yeah, it was a good sermon, at least the first part was. I considered telling Horace Crone maybe he should spend a little less time looking at his watch and a little more time listening to the sermon, but I resisted that temptation. Now, the second service with the black congregation is supposed to start at 10:30, or whenever I get everyone to sit down now, quit visiting, come on, let's go. And it can go all the way to noon or 12:15. Oh, I was amazed at the energy of the black congregation. It inspired me. You see, I could say something in the first service that I myself thought was rather profound. And they would just stare up at me like I was reading the fine print in their insurance forms. But the same sermon in the second service would be interrupted several times by various amens, and you tell it, brother. Oh, it got me going. It would get me going to the point that sometimes I'd forget my original message and I'd preach right off the top of my head. It's called improvisation. Oh, my wife would get caught up in it too. You see, Clara played the same hymns for both services. And I'm here to tell you, oh, they didn't sound good. Now, how can I say this without hurting anybody's feelings here? Here we go. White folks, that includes me now. We all like to sing our hymns like we're pitching hay at the same time. Yes, and we tend to scoop up to the notes at the beginning of our phrases. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord our Father. It tends to make the hymns slow. Maybe they're more reverent, I don't know. But what would be a slow, reverent hymn when sung by the white congregation would fairly dance when sung by the black congregation? You see, Clara was learning something she called adding notes. That is, she would play more notes than were written on the page. And when that black congregation would start singing more notes than she could play, she'd just drop out. And they'd sing a cappella till they were done. And they always knew when to finish that song. Clara never quite figured that out. Well, I've been preaching at both services for a couple months after that. Right before the second service, Katie Lee pulled me out in the narthex and wanted to talk to me about something important. She said First Baptist Church had chosen themselves a new minister. Me. She said it was not their intent to steal me from the Southern Baptists, but rather to share me on a more permanent basis. Oh my goodness. Oh, I was touched. So when I went over to tell the deacons over at Southern Baptist of my decision, I made it very clear that I felt this was something God wanted me to do. You see, they couldn't very easily say no to the Lord, now could they? No, sir. And they didn't. I was pleased and gratified to see the way they supported me in this decision. It made me feel good. I should mention, however, Horace Crone was sick that evening, couldn't attend the deacon's meeting. Oh, he never missed one after that. No, sir. Well, I've been preaching at both services for another month or two, and right after the second service, a young black couple, Otis and Janelle, came forward. Otis and Janelle King. They came forward to be baptized. Now, members of the First Baptist Church normally got baptized in McCook Creek, but it had been a rainy spring, the Illinois River was high, and the creek was a big muddy mess. So I suggested, you know what? Why don't we have you get baptized over at the Southern Baptist Church on a Sunday evening when there's no regular service? Because the Southern Baptists, they got a baptistry right inside the church. And we all agreed, oh, that's a good idea. And I thought it was until the day grew nigh and I realized no one was going to attend that baptismal service. No, sir. You see, the white congregation, they wouldn't be there because, oh, well, Otis and Janelle aren't members of our church. And the black congregation, they wouldn't be there. Oh, it's not being held in our church. I'm not even sure it's official. Felt bad. Becoming a Christian is an important day in one's life. I wanted both those congregations to come together and celebrate this day with Otis and Janelle. But no, sir, that wasn't going to happen, now was it? I went over to the church early that Sunday evening to get everything ready because I wanted it to be a special service, even if it was just Otis and Janelle and Clara and myself in attendance. Well, it was about a half an hour before the service was to begin, and suddenly it occurred to me I had not put the water in the baptistry. And there wasn't time to fill it before the service began. Who did I think was going to fill our tank with water? The good Lord himself? No, sir. Don't go testing me. And I don't know if you're familiar on how Baptists practice their religion, but we believe to be baptized, you need to be immersed in the water. You're totally immersed in the water. Then you come up from the water, washed new by the blood of the Lamb. See, we don't just splash water on you and call it done. No, sir. No, sir. We're named for John the Baptist, not John the Splasher. I didn't know what to do, so I sat down on the front pew and I prayed about it, and just like that, the Lord answered my prayer. I went over to the parsonage and I called Charlie Combs, head of the Venice Volunteer Fire Department. And I asked Charlie if he'd get together a couple of the men and bring over that big pumper truck, and fill up our tank with water. And although Charlie and most of the Venice Volunteer Fire Department are Catholics, they agreed to do so. And I barely hung up the phone when I heard the fire station bell go off. And a couple minutes later, I heard the fire engine coming down Pine Street with a siren blaring. Oh, that Charlie Combs. He loved to blow that siren. If he ever got a chance, about the only opportunity he gets is 4th of July parade once a year. So now that he had a bona fide reason, my goodness, he let it go. And to be honest with you, I was hoping he'd keep the whole operation quiet. I didn't want everybody in town to know I needed the help of a bunch of Catholics to run my Baptist church. Well, the men got there and they said, oh, it'll take 5 minutes to fill up that tank. So I went on out and opened up the front doors, and I was amazed to see there were people there. Horace and Donnie Crone were there. Goodness, I hadn't expected to see that. Well, the Twitchell family and all their boys were here. My goodness. Rip and Linda Crotchet, they must have come in a hurry because the baby, she still had her bib on, and Rip had a chicken wing in his hand. That's when I figured it out. They're not here for the baptismal service, they're here for the fire. Well, I knew the Lord would not care why they had come or what motivated them to be in church that evening. The main thing is they're here right now. So, as the fire engine headed back down Pine Street with the siren blaring, of course, I stood on the front steps welcoming people to the evening service. Good to see you. Come on in. We got plenty of room. Yes, sir. Want to finish that chicken before you sit down. Oh, and everyone was there, too. The thrill of a fire engine knows no racial boundaries. I had to pause for a moment as stood up and began the service, I paused and admired my congregation. Oh my goodness, the church was packed. It was like Christmas or Easter morning. I wished I'd had my brownie with me. I'd have snapped off a picture of them, because I knew they wouldn't fall for the fire engine trick again. But suddenly, as I looked around, I realized everyone was out of place. No one was sitting where they're supposed to be sitting. You see, Baptists, white and black, they tend to pick out a pew and then they sit there for the rest of their lives. Oh yeah, when they're dead and gone, they pass it on to their children. Their children sit in that pew. Horace and Dottie Crone always sit in the second pew on the right side. Legend has it, they were sitting there first, and then the church was built around them. But not today, no sir. No, the Thomas family from First Baptist was sitting in their pew. Horace and Dottie Crone were relegated to sitting on the front pew. And crammed in next to Horace Crone was Candy Lee and all her children. Candy Lee, the most outspoken Baptist woman I had ever met, was sitting right next to Horace Crone. About the most conservative Baptist man I'd ever met. Maybe Horace Crone was right. I looked around, maybe he was right. Maybe it's just my own foolish pride to think that I would be the one that would combine these two very different Baptist churches. Well, I must have been standing there stunned. I don't know how long I was standing there, because Clara cleared her throat from the piano and pointed to her pen. Yes? Yes, sir. Well, let's turn to number 222, Trust and Obey. We'll sing verse 1, 2, and 4. Now, thank goodness, Clara had already decided she would play the hymns as she always played them in this church. No extra notes. Those in attendance at First Baptist followed her lead. No extra notes. I'm sure it took a bit of restraint, but they all caught on rather quickly. I think most of them had pitched hay before. Well, our baptismal service was going well, I thought, as I helped Otis step into the cool, holy water. But as I lowered him down, as soon as he became immersed, Candy Lee let out a "Amen!" Well, it scared Horace Crone. It scared him so bad he jumped up, turned around, and looked at him. And there he stood in front of the whole congregation, all eyes on him. Now, Horace couldn't just sit back down and admit he jumped up and uttered panic. No, he'd look too silly, wouldn't he? And he couldn't say anything to her. Oh, no, that wouldn't be Christian of him. So Horace Crone did something I believe he did without thinking through completely. Horace Crone said, "Praise Jesus." And he sat back down. Well, heaven forgive me, but as I stood there in that holy water baptizing new Christians, I almost started to laugh. Until I looked down and realized Otis was still submerged. I plucked him up out of that water, coughing and sputtering, and as he pulled that fresh air in his lungs, he truly felt the Spirit being reborn. He was like a new baby taking his first breath, and no one seemed to notice. No, sir, everyone was just waiting for Janelle to be baptized to see what was going to go on down here. Suddenly, the dedication of two new Christians was eclipsed by the show on the front row. I will admit to you that as I lowered Janelle into the water, I had to glance over my shoulder. Candy Lee said, "Amen," followed by Horace Crone, who said, "Praise the Lord, brother." Now no one could think it was a mistake the first time. But what Horace Crone didn't realize is that he just opened the floodgates to any spontaneous outburst, as long as it was inspired by the Spirit, of course. I announced the final hymn right there from the baptistry. Let's sing the old-time religion. I don't know if you even need your hymnals on this, and we'll sing all the verses we can remember. 'Tis that old-time religion, 'tis that old-time religion. Oh, our baptismal service had gone so well, and it was just about over. And then, without warning, between the first and second verse, Clara started to add notes. And the black members of the congregation were starting to get all wound up. I knew in in a matter of moments, things could get out of control. So I tried to get Clara's attention. I knew she could slow this hymn back down to hay pitching pace if anyone could. No, no, no. She was far too busy adding notes to be distracted now. Suddenly, there was a flurry of notes from piano, and the black members of the congregation started to clap and sway. Oh my goodness, no one had ever clapped in this church before. And swaying, that's only one step away from dancing. Oh, the white members of the congregation, they just seemed baffled at first, and then, one by one, they laid down their hymnals, and they started to clap and sway with varying degrees of success. Oh, now it's gone too far, I thought. What's Horace Crone going to do? Maybe he'll grab Dottie, lead up the side, and not make a big scene, and oh my goodness, what if he stops us all and gives us all a big talking to? I looked down at Horace Crone. He was clinging to his hymn, looking straight ahead. He was not singing, nor was he clapping or swaying. He shifted his weight to the right, back to the left. Horace Crone was a tense man. Back to the right, to the left. I don't know if Horace Crone realized it, but he was swaying to the music. Well, I guess he figured it out. So Horace Crone, he surprised us all. He laid down his hymnal and he started to sing and clap and sway right there in church. Not because he got caught and was trying not to look foolish. On the contrary, the man looked like an idiot. But he couldn't stop himself. He was too full of the Spirit. Oh, it was an amazing sight. The white members of the congregation, they seemed to be letting out something they'd been holding in for a lifetime. Now when they did their best swaying too, they knocked somebody's hat off over there, a pair of glasses got broken over there. They knocked the arm off the end of one of the pews, and no one seemed to mind. And at the end of that hymn, Horace Crone, of all people, looked up at me and he said, "Well, come on, Reverend. Let's sing some more." And we did. We sang several more hymns. It was the longest Sunday evening service I'd ever attended, sir. And afterwards, no one come up and give me a talking to about it.